Welcome to Making Change Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're going to be talking with Robert Paxton, who is the librarian at the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. Welcome, Robert.
Well, thank you, Catherine.
It's amazing, I think, to have somebody in our studio who is actually a librarian at a jail, because maybe not everybody is aware that the library, A, has a jail, or B, has a librarian. So you have lived a very interesting life, and that has started actually in radio. So we've come full circle back to the beginning of your life with the Mutual Broadcasting Company in Arlington.
Yeah, that was a few years ago, 40 to be exact, and I guess I've come a long way, hopefully. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's been a fun gig at the library, I got to tell you.
Well, so the two of us, we should say that the two of us met through real estate, because you are also a real estate agent.
For 20 years.
For 20 years. And I was not ever a real estate agent, but I did work for Long & Foster. And that's how we connected. And both of us have a lot of other kinds of interests. So in addition to the many things that you've done since you started on radio, you became the director of a nonprofit during the big real estate crash of the mid-aughts.
In 2008, yeah. Had 3 kids. 2 were about to go to college, and the crash hit. Life was great in the early 2000s, and then 2008 was a terrible year, as a lot of us know. And a lot of people lost big money in real estate. But, I managed to survive, I guess. I did odd jobs. I worked for the Fairfax County rec centers as a pool manager, because at one time in life I was a lifeguard and had my pool license and got that renewed. And I got up at 4 a.m. and worked till noon, opening the pool for the swim teams. And in the afternoons I would go do real estate.
And you made it happen, because here you sit.
Well,
still have a career in real estate, but you're still doing this other side gig as a librarian too.
And I really love it. It's a great organization. I have to mention it's one of the oldest organizations around. It's actually was started. The Sheriff's Department started. Fairfax County Sheriff's Department started 277 years ago. So how many people can say they work for an organization that's
true.
That old?
227 years old.
So being a history geek, that's kind of a cool thing.
Well, so you are a history geek. You actually have a degree in history.
I do. Let me give a shout out to George Mason University.
Yay.
Go Patriots.
2 alumni sitting here.
High five.
High five. Yes, we are.
So
So from a historical perspective, yes, the Fairfax County we should talk about the difference between the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department, because a lot of people are confused about that.
They are.
So let's break it down to what is the difference between the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department.
Well, that's a great question. There's actually 3 main objectives for the Sheriff's Department. The main thing is they run the jail, and a lot of people don't realize, but it's a huge jail. We have at any one point we might have 1,000 inmates. We've sometimes gone over, sometimes a little under, but people don't realize that we house that many people, and it's almost like it's in a way it's like a hospitality business. I see people come and go.
True.
People that are there for a day, people are there for 3 years. It's just, and you get to know people, and it's odd to say that, but I feel like in a way it is like working for Marriott or something like that.
Well, it is, but just a little different, not quite as many amenities.
Yeah,
not
the
quite.
accommodations aren't quite as nice.
Not quite. But so how long have you been the librarian?
Well, it's been 6 years since I've been there. I actually started there. Before that, I was working for a nonprofit called Safe Haven. And just if we could just talk for a minute about
Sure.
Safe Haven. I actually started working there right just after the crash. Someone had told me about a part-time job, which is what I was looking for. It was a director, and it was called a day shelter. A lot of people think of homeless shelters, but one of the issues that I've noticed with homeless shelters is that they kick you out in the morning. So
Right.
they're great places, but they have to clean, they have
Right.
to do things during the day. So a lot of people don't have anywhere to go in the county during the day. So they would hang out at McDonald's. We've all seen people at McDonald's,
Right.
and we've all heard the stories about, like the famous Starbucks story about
Oh, goodness, yeah.
kicking people out of Starbucks,
Right.
and it's a real issue around here. So I didn't start the program, but it was started years ago by a wonderful man who was at the First Christian Church, and he read in the newspaper about a man who froze to death. He was sleeping under a bus, and he said, "I'm going to do something about it." And he went to the pastor, and the pastor said, "Yeah, great idea, let's do it." Started with his own money, buying soup and sandwiches, and feeding 5 or 6 people a day. And when I got there, it was, like I say, during the downturn, so the problem got a lot worse
Yeah, it sure did.
in Northern Virginia. So we had a wonderful kitchen. We had like a commercial kitchen. And I just said, you know what I've noticed with homeless people is they eat a lot of processed foods. They eat a lot of canned foods.
Well, there's no place to make food. You and I have had this discussion about TANF funds.
Exactly.
And TANF funds not covering prepared foods.
Right.
But it doesn't do any good to go to the grocery store if you don't have a kitchen
Or you don't have a can opener.
or a refrigerator
Yeah.
or a stove.
So how do you prepare foods?
Right.
So a lot of people, you'd see them eating out of a can, eating like 7-Eleven type food. No knock on 7-Eleven, but they
Not
do
the most nutritious food.
Yes, yeah. So they would. My vision was let's do home cooked meals. Let's do fresh vegetables, fresh fruits. Every morning I'd stop off at Shoppers Food Warehouse and buy blueberries, strawberries, bananas, just things that people need to eat.
And those are so nutritious, but they're also perishable. So there's no way to keep them for longer than a day or 2 days. And there's no place for people to even keep things like that. For those of you who are just joining us, this is Making Change Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me tonight is Robert Paxton, who is the librarian for the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. If you'd like to call in and ask Robert a question, we do have we have a number. No such thing as toll-free, really. Use your phone. Use your cell phone. It doesn't matter. Long distance, what a thing. The number is 703-560-8255 if you've got a question for Robert about the adult horror homes and pretty much everything else. We saw something horribly similar when there was a government shutdown recently. Where, again, people who live paycheck to paycheck, even if you make a decent paycheck, were not able to sustain paying their bills without a paycheck. And, I think people don't understand how fragile people's livelihoods are. When you live like I said, there's entrenched poverty. You and I both know, and people who live in Fairfax County frequently see people panhandling or wandering the streets with their backpacks or, other signs of homelessness. It's not like Los Angeles or San Francisco, but clearly we have homelessness here. And we have hidden and invisible poverty here. But when we have things like a government shutdown or we had that horrific collapse of the housing market, then suddenly people who never imagined that they would be in that situation find themselves in that situation.
Absolutely. It's sad, very sad.
But Safe Haven was there, and you ended up growing the program. You were there for what, almost 5 years?
Yep. And it seems like most of the jobs I've had in my life have been about 5 years. And then I don't know about you, but that's about the time for burnout. I think.
Yeah, it's called the 7-year itch, and I'd say my tenure is about 7 years, and then I have to reinvent myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you said that because I feel kind of like there's something wrong with me.
No, I don't think so. We are cut from the same piece of cloth if that's the case, because I just want to do something different.
Right,
New challenges, things I didn't know about, or situations that have popped up. We were talking about before the show started about social media. I mean, that wasn't a thing. Within the last 25 years, neither was email.
Right.
Or the internet. So people have to remember that, the world has changed so much. And some of us, like you and I, have decided to move around and figure out how to sort of leverage the thing it's got an unmet need.
Well, absolutely. And one of the things I learned very quickly was that social media can be one of your best friends. At Safe Haven, we had a small budget. I got paid a small salary. My assistant was paid a small salary. And the only way we really made it was recruiting volunteers. And I just learned quickly that Fairfax County is full of people that want to do good, that have time on their hands, a lot of retired people, and a lot of smart people, too. Fairfax County, for those out of the area, probably don't know that it's one of the highest educated markets in the country. We've got probably more people with college degrees here than almost anywhere in the country, I think. I
think so.
Really read up on that, but I did find that there were just people that wanted to help. They wanted to know what they could do. We'd have people come in. I'd say, well, can you cook? Can you help me go to the grocery store? Can you, we had one lady that I learned about this. I had never heard the term gleaning before, but I found a few people that were into gleaning, and they would go to farms and they'd get the fruits and vegetables that the farmers couldn't sell. And they were perfectly fine. They just maybe had some spots on them.
Right, weren't perfect.
They weren't perfect. So I learned about that. I just learned that most people in this world want to do good. They really do. And I can't say enough about the volunteers that helped me grow Safe Haven. I still keep in touch with a lot of the people. And a lot of the people were older, too. One of the ladies, I'll give a shout out, Evelinda, if you're listening. Evelinda just turned 100.
Wow.
And she would come in, and I was always afraid, she'd get bumped or something, but she just was just a tough lady, and she wanted to do good, and she didn't want any recognition either. She just came in, did her job, and had a smile on her face, and just really, that's what inspired me. It inspired me to get up in the morning and make sure I was there to open the place. We did have a few huge snowstorms, which is kind of a rare thing this winter. We haven't had any, have we?
No, we have not.
But I remember, I think it was in maybe 2010.
It was Snowmageddon.
Yeah, Snowmageddon.
Yep.
I was driving home from cleaning up, and was about halfway home, lived in Fairfax Station. And I turned around to go back because I knew, first of all, it was going to take me about 8 hours to get home.
Yeah.
And I figured, I have to be back there in the morning. I'm going to go sleep at the church. And so I called Pastor Kathleen, and she gave me the code to get into her office. And I slept on her couch. And in the morning, I was there to greet people and make coffee.
And it was a good thing. And that was a good thing because we were snowed in for days.
We were, yep.
Days.
And at least we did lose power, but we had a gas stove, so I could make coffee. And
look at that.
Yeah, so that Boy Scout training came in handy.
See, there you go. You need some real skills. Actually, one of my ex-husbands, the second one actually, used to say, he's Australian, and he grew up in the Outback, and he used to say, if you want to see just how smart Americans are, turn off the electricity. and he really kind of had a point, because without electricity, a lot of people truly would be lost as far as survival skills go.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, too, that one of my ex-wives, we had, when we first moved to Fairfax Station, she told me, get rid of that Weber grill with the charcoal, buy a propane grill. She wore me down. I finally did. And I swear to you, about a week later, the storm hit. We were out of power for 5 days.
Wow.
And but I could get up in the morning and make coffee and make her happy.
Look at that.
Look at that. I didn't make her that happy, though.
Yeah,
Because
whatever. you know how we were saying that we like, the new adventure and the challenge? How we reinvent ourselves, Robert. Some of us, that's just how we roll.
I like that.
It's just how we roll. So how did you even find out that there was an opening at the jail for a librarian?
Well, like I said, I started getting kind of the 5-year itch and started looking on the county website for jobs. And I applied for probably a dozen jobs, never even got an interview. And I thought, I'm qualified for that job. I could get that job. And I did get a couple interviews, and I think that people looked at me, they looked at my age, they looked at my background, and they said, well, he's not going to stick around. He'll be here 6 months, and he'll be out the door. But it's hard to convince people that, you know what, I'm at a point in my life, my kids got through college, you don't need as much money to live on over time. So you don't have to make as much as you used to. And I applied for the job, and it took a long time, because to work for the sheriff's department, you've got to have a pretty pristine background. Although I was honest with them. I told them I did spend one night in the old jail in Fairfax. There probably aren't many of us still around that have spent a night in the old jail. And now it's a museum.
I was about to say, I'm not even sure I know where the old jail is. For those of you who are just joining us, this is Making Change Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we are talking with Robert Paxton, who is the librarian for the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. If you've got questions for Robert, you can call us at 703-560-8255. He is now going to share with us where the old jail was.
Well, you can actually see it now from the new jail, because they just tore down the Massey building.
Which was a very ugly building.
It was horrible. It was
terrible building.
But ugly. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
You can. It was just so terrible.
And they finally, just last week, they got it all the way down. So now it's just a pile of dirt. And I can actually see from my office at the jail, I can see the old courthouse. It's well, you know where it's where the two cannons are.
Okay, yeah, the old courthouse. But
right.
But where was the jail part?
The jail was right next to it. It's the building facing 123.
Okay.
Because the courthouse faces University. No, yes, it faces 123.
Right.
Oh,
the jail.
The jail faces Main Street.
Main Street. Okay, I know where it is now.
Sorry.
I know where it is. And there's a parking lot behind it, right?
I've only lived here 60 years. So.
It's okay. Like we said, we are very early alumni of George Mason University. You and I, very early alumni of the university.
Well before the Final Four.
Oh, yeah, well before that. Yeah. So I know where you're talking about. There's a parking lot behind that building. Yeah. Yep. That's where, the only reason I know that building is because that's where everybody stages for the 4th of July parade.
Right.
I stood in that parking lot.
Yeah, to watch the fireworks.
But I didn't realize that was the old jail.
Yeah.
So you spent a night there.
I did spend one night. I think I was at George Mason.
Aha.
And I had a dog, and I was walking my dog. My dog was little. I mean, probably 7-8 pounds. It was a Yorkshire Terrier. And yes, I'll admit I had a Yorkshire Terrier. I now have a Chihuahua. So I
going
love
smaller, man.
I love small dogs. You can just put them in a bag. You can take them anywhere. I almost brought her tonight. She wanted to come with me, but
really?
I figured
Chihuahuas tend to be a little loud. Is
This
yours
one's
the-
not. She
not
is
not a
quiet.
yippy dog?
She's not a yappy dog.
Oh, okay.
Unless you try to brush her teeth, and then it's like,
Well, I can understand that from a dog's perspective. So what happened with it now? Now you've got us hanging on tenterhooks here
Well,
about the Yorkshire Terrier.
So one of my neighbors had two dogs and was walking their dogs, and my dog was just trying to kind of puff up and protect herself, and one of his dogs bit my dog, and so I kicked his dog.
Uh-oh.
And then he said, I don't know, I can't remember what he said, but I think I said a few curse words back to him. And I told him if he actually had a cattle prod. And this is in Fairfax County. He's carrying a cattle prod. You know what a cattle
Yes,
prod
I
is? Yeah,
do.
you're from
I
the
was
country,
I'm
right?
from the country. I certainly do know what a cattle prod is. That's a
And
weapon.
And he did. He zapped my dog with his cattle prod, and I told him if he ever did that again, he was going to
Oh,
have
boy.
some serious consequences.
So
And
the police were called?
the police were called, and that was my first encounter with the sheriff's department, because the sheriff's department, getting back to what you asked earlier, one of their other duties is they serve warrants. So I had a warrant for my arrest, and they came and took me away in handcuffs and took me to the old jail until I could call my father, who was actually a retired D.C. police officer. So he
Oh.
begrudgingly came down and bailed me out. So
What a good dad.
he was. And I told the lady who interviewed me, Emily Fari, she grilled me and she asked me if I'd ever been to jail, and I had to tell her the story about that. And she kind of like, okay, like.
Is there a statute of limitations on like dog
well, and
things?
I found out later that it was in the old jail, and those records are long gone. So
See, you didn't even have to confess,
I
but
didn't
you
have
did
to
the right
I
thing.
did.
You did the right thing by confessing and telling the truth. You did. So,
So-
Emily Fari, she's an interesting person too.
She is a wonderful person. I have to say, at first I was a little put off because she really did grill me. She grilled me hard, and but now we've become friends. We kind of share the same vision. I've realized that she's passionate about reading, literacy, and she's actually a writer. She writes. I didn't know this about her, but on the side, when she's not putting on her badge and being a deputy, she's actually a children's book writer. She's written a few children's books.
Well, that makes sense because she's the one who started the little free library that's in the lobby of the jail for the children who come on Saturday and Sunday for visiting hours.
That was one of the greatest ideas. We've got families. They visitation hours are on the weekends, and people have to come and they wait. You know, they may have to wait a couple hours to see their loved ones. And a lot of the people have kids. The kids would sit in the lobby with nothing to do. And Emily said, hey, let's put a little free library there. And so I help her collect books. I'll get books, and I'll put them in the roll call room for her and call her up and tell her there's books there. And she'll get them and put them in the free library. And
And of course, the thing about the little free libraries, and I love this concept, they're all over the world. They're people's front yards. They're in front of
Neighborhoods,
they're in
yeah.
front of schools.
Yeah.
But with the little free library, you can read the book and put it back, or you can read the book and take it home, or you can exchange a book. You can bring a book and take a book.
absolutely.
So it's a very unique thing that's very different from just getting a library book because you can actually keep the book.
Yeah.
And I think that has made a difference. And one of the reasons that on an ongoing basis, the little free library in the lobby needs to be replenished with books because children take them home,
Yep.
which is a good thing.
It's a good thing, and it's just such a heartwarming thing to see kids reading. And it warms my heart to see anybody reading, really, but especially kids. And when I talk to some of my inmates and they're about ready to go home, I just tell them. I ask them, "Do you have kids?" And they say yes, and I say, I want you to go home and read to them. And I'll give them a few of those books, and they can take them home. And you know, and I just think that the best thing you can do for your kids is read to them.
I think that's true. And I think that low literacy levels among inmates in our jails and prisons says something about what happens when children don't have access to books, don't develop strong reading skills. Some of them, I did a show on dyslexia recently where they said a number of people in our jails and prisons are dyslexic. Some of them have never been diagnosed as having dyslexia, but it's impacted their literacy skills. And so we need to pay attention to the connection between low literacy among a high population of people in our jails and prisons. So we're going to go to a break, but when we come back, you can ask questions of Robert Paxton, who's the librarian at the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center.
This is Radio Fairfax, a public access cable and internet station provided by Fairfax Public Access, a 501c3 organization in Fairfax County, Virginia.
Al Cooper, Brooks Williams, Al Stewart, Cheryl Wheeler, Arlo Guthrie, Chris. Contemporary singer-songwriter folk artists side by side with long-standing esoteric rock performers. That's what Eclectic Hours is. It's music for baby boomers, music where you gotta listen to the words. Eclectic Hours, Sunday mornings from 10 a.m. to noon. James Taylor, Kate Campbell, Joe Cocker, Livingston Taylor, Lucy.
Free for Me, bringing you musical gems rarely heard on the radio. Hear the White Stripes, St. Vincent, and the Hot Melts. Free for Me, Tuesday at 5 on Radio Fairfax.
Let's go down into the subway station where you hear the strangest things. Every Saturday at 4 o'clock on Night Train Memories, Sounds of the Cities.
Want to hear what there is in jazz besides usual big names? Come listen to The Outer View, where you'll hear vocalists, pianists, jazz rock, jazz from foreign countries, and much more, going all the way from the mainstream to the cutting edge. The exploring happens on The Outer View with Jerry Howard, Tuesdays 2 to 3 on Radio Fairfax.
Tired of the same old oldies stations playing the same tracks over and over again? If you want to hear some great 50s music you probably never heard before, come and listen to my show. Colin Davies, the Professor of Rock, here on Thursdays from 4 till 6.
The radio programs aired by FPA reflect the viewpoints of individual producers and do not necessarily represent those of the station, its staff, or supporters.
Like what you hear? Like what you see? Lights, camera, action. Here's your chance to put your voice and talent to use. What are you waiting for? Your show could be the next big hit. Get involved. Attend a free orientation. Learn to create your own radio and television show. We have courses in radio and television production, post-production, and much more. Come volunteer on a show and sharpen your skills. Don't delay. Don't hesitate. Pick up the phone and call us at 571-749-1102 or visit our website www.fcac.org/orientation.
Welcome back to Making Change Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me tonight is Robert Paxton, who is the librarian at the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. Welcome back, Robert.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
So if you've got burning questions for Robert, you can call us at 703-560-8255. So, Robert, give us sort of a window into how your library operates. It's probably not like a regular public library since it's in the jail.
Well, I wish that the inmates could come to the library, but unfortunately, that's not how the powers that be want to do things.
Yeah, it's one of those amenities that's not Marriott-like.
Right.
You can't just go check out a book.
And they tell me the reason, because I always want to know, well, why? I was one of those kids, but I did ask why, and they said, well, there's just too many people. We can't have that much movement in the jail. We couldn't control
Right.
things. So,
Well, you said there's at any one time there's 1,000 people there.
yeah, and that would just be a lot of movement to
Right.
have all these people come to the jail. So what we do is we've got these big old library carts, kind of like mini bookmobiles, and we actually go out to the cells. The jail is separated into different sections. So you've got different, like one area has pods, and with the deputy in the center that kind of looks over everything. Another one is a little more informal, where inmates have their own little bedroom area, but they have a big common area. So we'll take, one day we'll take books to I call it the new section. The new section is where they have the big open area. So we'll take the book cart in, and inmates will come and browse the books, and they can actually have up to 10 books. And believe it or not, we do have people that they'll take 10 books, and a lot of them will read all 10 books within a week. We go once a week to
Wow.
each section. So I've talked to a couple. One inmate told me he had read over 300 books while he was in the library. And
That's
I'm like,
amazing. That's a good use of someone's time.
That's amazing. I mean, I don't know that I've read 300 books in my lifetime. So I'm kind of a slow reader, but I love to read. But I try to inspire people to read. And
Well, one of the ways you do that too is your book group, which has been quite successful.
yeah, when I got there, I've just always, I'd never been in a book club actually, and
I've never been in one either.
but I thought it might be a good idea because these guys have a lot of time on their hands. I noticed a lot of people watching TV all day, and I just thought I'm going to try to change things. So I decided to have a book club, and the gentleman who hired me, I've got to give a shout out to him. I love this guy, Kevin Smith. Kevin, I went to Kevin one day and said, Kevin, I'd like to do a book club, and he thought about it and said, well, let's give it a try. And we did it, and he sat in. He wanted to see what it was like, and afterward he said, let's do it. You know, it's a good idea. And actually the very first book we did was a book called The Art of War, and you probably know that book.
I do.
And we did that, and then we just went on from there. We read every week. We read a different book, and it keeps me reading too. And I've bought a couple books on speed reading. I'm trying to become a speed reader. So
Yeah, one book a week. That's a big commitment.
it is, especially because, as I said earlier, I'm kind of a history geek, and most of those history books, the biographies, are pretty thick.
Yep, yeah, pretty dense.
So we've done some biographies. One of the recent books we did was a book called Never Caught, which was a book about a slave from Mount Vernon who actually
Yes, one of
escaped.
George Washington's slaves, and they never stopped looking for her either.
They tried. They actually found. They knew where she was, but Washington at the time was president, so he had to be very careful about, going overboard to try to get her back. So he sent one of his cousins up and tried to talk to her to come back, and she said, "You know what? You tell Mr. Washington that I'll come back if he guarantees my freedom." And actually, Washington was so incensed that the slave woman tried to negotiate. Right.
The nerve.
So he basically, at that point, just cut off, just stopped looking for her. And she never went back to Mount Vernon, even though she had, at the time, they were grown kids. But, unfortunately, she had to leave her kids to get her freedom. But that was something that was very inspiring to the inmates. We've also read fiction. One of the recent books we did was a man called Uva.
Oh, yes, I love that book.
Isn't that great?
I love that book so much. I can see how that would resonate. I really do.
So we did that. The Art of Racing in the Rain. was another
Oh,
one.
that's such a I just so cried. I so cried at the end of that book.
You know, at first I thought the inmates wouldn't like that, but they're these big tough guys.
Yeah.
But every person liked it. Not one person thought it was corny.
It was told from the dog's point of view too.
Yeah.
It just, but it's a great story. Gosh, I love that book.
And you've given me a couple good suggestions too. So
I love to read. I love to read. But when I think about what I would like if I was the librarian, I mean, you have to pick things that you think they would be interested in. Otherwise, they're not going to read them, or the discussions aren't going to be that great. So there's a lot of responsibility for you in just selecting the books.
Right. And actually, occasionally what I'll do is I'll say, look, guys, pick something you want to read this week. I'm going to give you an easy time. You just, whatever you would read, that's what we're going to do. And they come back and they talk about their books that they've read. It's a little harder to have a book club like that. It's easier when you're all reading the same book and you can kind of pounce on things and, just say, hey, I saw that too, and I got that. And, it's a good, it really helps with literacy, and it helps people continue reading and to like reading.
I think beyond reading a book, the most exciting thing is to talk with somebody about the book. I mean, I love reading books, but when you can talk to somebody about how excited you are about the book, and I do understand why people are in book clubs. I've just never joined one, but I get it. My mother belonged to book clubs, and all I can remember though is that every once in a while she'd get some book she hated. And she'd be like, "Oh, I had to read this terrible." I know. She goes, "I read that book and I hated it." But beyond the occasional, like it just didn't resonate with me. I think she really enjoyed getting together and talking with people about books. How many people are in the group? Number one, and how do you get enough copies of the book for everybody?
Well, when I first started the book club, I was a little bit optimistic, and I started with 20, and that just got to be a little unmanageable. So I found kind of the optimal number is 12.
Okay.
So I keep it to 12. We do have a waiting list to get in. I wish we had more people. But the other question you asked me was, how do I get the books? And I have to do a shout out to the Fairfax County Public Libraries right here in Fairfax City. They've been wonderful to me. They heard about my book club, and they've volunteered. They give me a few times a year. They'll say, "Give me a list of books."
So they amass the correct number of public library books. They just amass them for you.
And then after we've read the book maybe 2 or 3 times, and they're starting to get a little bit beat up, I donate them out to Loudoun County's Sheriff's Department, and they've started a book club too. So.
I think that is so amazing. For those of you who are just joining us, this is Making Change Radio, and I am your host, Catherine Reed. And tonight we're talking with an amazing change maker, Robert Paxton, who is the librarian at the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. So I think it's wonderful that now that you've created this model that works, that you can now help to support this group out in Loudoun County. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's a number of jails all across Virginia. Some of them are small and don't have 2 nickels to rub together. They can barely provide the basic necessities. There are some larger regional jails that seem to have more programs and services. Fairfax County, and for a lot of reasons, we have resources, but we also have a sheriff. To your point, she started out in programs.
Right.
And so, what the Adult Detention Center has to offer in Fairfax is a robust set of programs meant to help people use their time most effectively while they're incarcerated, reentry programs, education programs, literacy programs, lots of things to help, prepare people to rejoin the community.
We have over 100 programs that we do, and that's just incredible.
It is unbelievable.
And the reason we have so many programs is we have a lot of people that come to us and they say, you know what, I'm an art teacher and I would like to do this program. And that's how most of these programs get started. It's not just reading or the book club. We have art programs. We have a lady that does yoga, and she does both men's and women's classes. And she actually tells me, her favorite class are the men's class because they're really into it. They're into it actually more than the women, which surprised me.
It would surprise me too. Yeah.
But they programs like that. We've got several religious programs, all different denominations. There's obviously nothing we push really. We do have a chaplain there, but he's very good too. He just realizes that we have so many different religions there, and he can't do it all, so he brings in people from the outside, and he has his own little library too that he maintains.
This puts me in mind of the fact that there are both men and women at the Fairfax County Adult Detention Center. You can't do a group that has both men and women in it. I mean, we should put a caveat around that your programs are gender segregated.
They do keep them segregated. I made the mistake when I first got there of bringing a lady trustee into the library when there were men trustees in there, and I had no,
right.
To me it was like
you were new to the environment.
And one of the deputies saw that, and he reprimanded me and wrote me up for that. But I just didn't know. I mean, I was kind of hired, and I was thrown in to do this. And and I'm still learning, believe it or not. I've been there 6 years, and there's still little things that I'll catch myself because I've been in the civilian life my entire life, and I'm not used to this regimented. But I've grown to appreciate it and see why things happen, why they do the things they do. I've really gained a great respect for the sheriff's department, all the way down from the Sheriff Kincaid. Like I said, she has been tremendously supportive. Every year we have a volunteer appreciation day, and I mean, she goes all out. We have a very nice lunch. She brings in like the Haagen-Dazs ice cream people, and just really takes care of the volunteers. And she just really inspires people to want to help people, because these people, even though many have really committed some heinous crimes, they're still people, and they've made mistakes. And she believes in giving people a second chance or even a third chance, and I do too. And it's nice that we both share that same vision, that we can have empathy for people no matter what they've done. And I've also over time I've learned that I really don't want to know what people have done. I've had a few people start to tell me their story, and I just say, hold it right there. I really don't want to know your case. Sometimes you can't help it. It's on TV, it's on the radio, it's on the front page of the paper. It's right there, so you see what people have done. But I don't go out of my way to look up, see what people have done.
And that's kind of an interesting perspective in that none of us should be defined by the worst thing we ever did. And to define somebody by their crime instead of seeing them as a human being with so much more than one thing they did. I think a lot of people are not there. I think many people have difficulty getting past that thing you did to see your humanity and the fact that all human beings should have inherent dignity because they have inherent value and worth. Not everybody sees it that way, but clearly you are the right person for the job. The question is, what about the women's group, which I think had somebody and now doesn't have somebody?
Yeah, we when I started the men's book club, it became successful, and so one of our deputies that I worked for, she said, "Hey, what about a women's group?" And so we started one And I wish I could have been the one to do it, but I just don't have. I work 20 hours a week, so I don't have that much time on my hands. But we got a great lady to do the book club, and she actually had a volunteer helping her. And unfortunately, the volunteer had to retire, so she just couldn't do it all. She had another job at the jail, and that kind of went by the wayside. So we're actually looking for somebody out there who, if they're interested, if they like book clubs, they like to read, it's a great little gig to have. We would prefer a woman to do it.
Sure. That makes complete sense.
It doesn't have to be like.
Although, a better sense of chick lit. Just kidding there. But it's just kind of like how you said the books that you picked resonated with the men. Mm-hmm. It makes sense that, a woman leading the group might have some idea of, a vast body of literature that might resonate with the women inmates.
Yeah. Although I have found a lot of women enjoy reading about World War II. And
oh my gosh, there's so many books out there about World War II. Oh, you have no idea. The Lilac Girls. I mean, so many books. But again, a lot of these books about World War II are written from a feminine perspective or a woman's experience. They were spies. Mm-hmm. They were part of the resistance. I mean, amazing stories all of a sudden coming out about World War II, but definitely from a woman's perspective. For those of you who are just joining us, this is Making Change Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and the change maker we're talking to today is Robert Paxton, who is the librarian at the Fairfax Adult Detention Center, which has a library and a bookmobile that goes from cell to cell and a book group. So going forward, as far as maintaining, I'm sure, you're not going to do this forever. You've got plans. Mm-hmm. You're coming up. You've been there 6 years. That says the meter has kind of ticked over to you may be done here. So ways that people can support the program. Obviously, people can donate books, I'm assuming.
Well, that's how we get most of our books, actually, from private donations. I've had people call up and say, my kids have left home. We've got all these books. I don't want them anymore. Can you come get them, or can I bring them to the library? We can certainly do that, and people can go on our website. They can send me an email if I'm allowed to give out my email address.
Sure.
I could do that. It's robert.paxton, Paxton, at fairfaxcounty.gov, and you have to spell out Fairfax County, and that will get to me. I'll be there until May 1st, which is my retirement date. I'm retiring almost immediately after I turn 65, and moving to North Carolina, and I'm thinking about there's a jail in Raleigh where I'm moving to, thinking about approaching them and seeing if maybe I could do something, even volunteer with them. And
I think it's a great idea. It's a best practice. It's a best practice. You've shown the model has worked. It's made a difference. And I think that if you offer the expertise and the experience, and you can, and this is what you do well. You did this at Safe Haven, and if you can find the people in Raleigh to donate the books and help to support the program that way, then you have every reason to be successful there. I think literacy is just so important, and providing books, encouraging people to read instead of watching television, giving people a place to talk about ideas. To me, that's the thing about talking about books, is you're talking about ideas and a larger sense of the world.
Well, and I have to say, really, there are probably two people that in my life have inspired me. The first was my mother, who only had a high school education, but she loved books, and she instilled that love in me a long time ago. And the other person that's really inspired me is my daughter, Caroline. Caroline loves books. She was actually a creative writing major, and she tells me about a lot of books that I use at the jail. One of them was the Trevor Noah book.
Oh, Born a Crime. I love that book.
And she was
such a great book.
She was right on. She said, I think your guys would like
Yep,
that.
yep. I can see where that would so resonate.
So I have to give a shout out to Caroline. Thank you, Caroline, and you inspire me every day. So.
And that's the whole thing, too, I think, with, creating a space where you can engage with inmates in this way. And it's a discussion about ideas. It's connecting people with people in a different way. And again, it comes back to recognizing their humanity, the fact that they're people and they want the same things. And part of that is to just have conversations about something you've read that's opened your mind or opened your world or, brought something to you didn't know before.
We have, I think I mentioned earlier, there's a chaplain at the jail, and Vic's a wonderful guy, and we're about the same age and kind of approaching retirement. But we both love what we're doing. Like, honestly, I don't want to retire. I really don't. But this area is a little expensive to live in, and I'm going to be making the move, like I said, to North Carolina. But Vic and I talk a lot, and one thing that we agree on is that we're both kind of trying to do the same thing. He's doing it from the religious point of view. I'm doing it really from a secular point of view, but it's the same principle.
It's a ministry. You have
a
a book ministry.
Thank
You
you.
have a book ministry. I totally get that.
Can I give an amen?
Yes. Yeah. Amen.
Well, like I said, in about 2 months, I'm going to retire. It is getting a little strange to think about retirement, but I have so many books I want to read. I'm going to do that. I'm going to try to volunteer at the local jail and see if I can start a book club there. And the other thing I would like to do is kind of work with my hands a bit, because I spent my life working in offices, different offices, and I just think it'd be nice to do things with your hands. And I've always admired Jimmy Carter.
Habitat for Humanity. Yep.
And I found out that there is an office down there for Habitat for Humanity, and I've already approached them, and I'm planning to hopefully build a few houses, or maybe build some ramps for people, or grab bars, or do something for older people and that don't have a lot of money. And so I want to do some of that too. So I'm not done yet.
No, and Virginia will miss you. Fairfax will miss you. What'd you say? 60 plus years here.
Well, 63. I went away to college for 1 year and then came back to George Mason.
I did that too. I went to Boston and came to George Mason after Boston.
I went to Colorado.
Well, okay, there you go.
A little further.
I don't know. And it was kind of cool in Boston.
You're an East Coast girl.
I am. Well, I think you have devoted your life, because you've had an interesting career in tech. We didn't even mention the fact that after your brief radio career, you went to MCI, you were at Intel, you were in Silicon Valley. You came back and did real estate, but all along the way, you really have found ways to give back to the community. It wasn't just a career. You have found your vocation in serving other people, less fortunate people, and you've done an amazing job with that. With Safe Haven, as being librarian. I know that North Carolina is just going to be knocked over. They're going to how do we get so lucky? Who is this guy?
Oh, please.
Who is this guy? How did we get so lucky? But seriously, Robert, I mean, I've known you for a long time too, and we are kind of kindred spirits as well as very
well. We are. We maybe not from the same party, but I think we're kindred spirits.
See, look how bipartisan we are. Which only goes to show you, that people serve in their own way. And I just want to say thank you and happy retirement.
Well, thank you.
For those of you who are listening, please remember that there is a library program at the Fairfax Adult Detention Center. Find out ways that you can support it. And join us next Thursday night at 9 p.m. for Making Change Radio.